Our speaker, Jennifer Allen, is seeking nomination as the Democratic Party candidate for Pima County's Board of Supervisors, District 3. For over 25 years, Jennifer has served as executive leadership roles in local, state, and national nonprofit organizations that have had far-reaching impacts on Arizonans' lives, livelihoods, and desert lands. Most recently, she was the executive director of the ACLU of Arizona, a senior vice president at League of Conservation Voters, executive director of Border Action Network, and staff at Western Shoshone Defense Project. Her experience ranges from environmental conservation and climate justice, voting rights, criminal justice reform, immigrant and border justice, and indigenous sovereignty. Jennifer is a problem solver with a deep commitment to elevating the voices of communities who are often unheard. Arizona has been her home to 4 generations of Jennifer's family. She is Latina and the proud mama of bilingual TUSD student, partner of a City of Tucson employee, sister of a union truck driver, and daughter of parents who taught her the values of compassion and hard work. When it's not too hot, Jennifer can be found on southern Arizona's hiking trails or biking on the loop. Let's give a warm welcome to Jennifer Allen.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It was so thorough, I'm not sure what to say. And I almost typed into chat, I think the League of Conservation Voters often gets conflated with the League of Conservative Voters, which is a little, anyway, it happens a lot. Thank you all for both inviting me here and having the opportunity to talk with you all. And then also for your role and your work in really building, growing, strengthening Democrats in the greater Tucson area. So as Joseph said in the introduction, my name is Jennifer, and I am really excited and honored to be running for the Pima County Board of Supervisors seat for District 3. This is the first time I have run. It's a new role. I have a whole lot of respect for candidates and folks in office now, because I had no idea that running for office was it's a lot. But I am familiar with doing a lot. As was said in my introduction, I live here in Midtown Tucson, have lived in Southern Arizona for over, it's now around 26 years. My entire family is here, from, as I said, my 11-year-old son, and we should rest in peace, my abuela, and kind of everybody in between, from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Tucson is home, Southern Arizona is home, and the Sonoran Desert is the place that I am excited to continue to work to protect for generations to come. Most of my career has put me in the role of essentially being an organizer, which for me means that it is about creating opportunities for people to be able to engage around their values, right? Particularly thinking about the folks who are most impacted by problems, and who are kind of closest, in making sure that those folks who know the issues and are impacted by issues first and worst can be the closest to the seat of power and have a seat at the table where decisions are made. And I have done that in ways that both working with really marginalized communities, but also in ways of bringing together kind of unlikely allies and partners to come up with solutions on really complex issues, like around border policy issues. My track record throughout my entire professional career has been rooted in figuring out ways to work with communities to combat systemic inequity and racism, and to advance justice, dignity, and opportunity. As was said in the introduction, for the last 25 plus years, I have worked in nonprofit community organizations at the local, state, national level. Most recently, I was the executive director at the ACLU of Arizona, where I had the privilege of working on reproductive rights issues, criminal justice reform issues, and many others. For about a decade, I was the senior vice president at the League of Conservation Voters, where I was hired to, I was actually initially hired as a Latino outreach program director. And as I had the role, I grew it and grew it until we created a brand new department within LCV that focused on community organizing, working with communities of color, and ensuring that as we fight for climate justice, that our democracy is intact and that people can actually engage in elections and have their vote be counted. So it was a body of work that I created and built up there around climate justice, democracy, and voting rights. I created a program called Chispa. There's one in Arizona called Chispa, Arizona, and then there's also Chispa, Florida, Texas, Nevada, Colorado, and Chispa programs across the country. And I'm very proud of the work that has been done there, particularly around converting, working with school boards to convert their dirty diesel school buses into clean electric buses, especially given kind of the fragility and growth of children's lungs, spending times in essentially diesel fume-filled metal boxes. And some kids are on school buses an hour a day. Getting those switched over to electric buses is something I'm incredibly proud of. I've also been the founding executive director of Border Action Network, which was an immigrant and border community organization, which means, to build that, I was the founding ED of that organization, and to get it up and going, we knocked on doors, about 2,000 doors in the little Arizona border towns from Naco to San Luis Rio Colorado, Douglas, and everywhere in between, ended up building up an organizational base comprised of people who call the border home and those who are crossing it. I'm very proud of the fact that the organization at the time that I was there was the largest immigrant membership organization in the state. We had over 4,000 families who were predominantly immigrant families and undocumented families that were part of the organization and ensuring that we were fighting for human rights for all. The last piece I'd mention is a role with the Western Shoshone Defense Project, where I, right out of college, asked myself the question of how do I'm the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree. So it was a big deal. And I wanted to ensure that I was using this education in such a way to really combat some of the fundamental injustice within this country, which of course would point me in the direction of working around Indigenous land rights issues. So I worked in North Central Nevada for the Western Shoshone on treaty and land rights issues and environmental protection. All that is to say, I am running for county supervisor because some of the most complex issues facing our region, be it immigration and border, climate change, water scarcity and the need for water management, criminal justice issues, and thinking about our jail, and issues impacting our elections and voting rights. These are all issues that I have significant expertise and experience around. But then moreover, the communities that I have worked with for decades are communities that are central to Pima County District 3, from rural communities out in Ajo. I was just down in the town of Sasabe and 3 Points over the weekend, in Aravaca, working with low-income, rural, urban, immigrant, and Indigenous communities is my background. I'm running not only because I have the experience and the kind of relationships and expertise around the issues, but also just because I know that working families are struggling. Folks are struggling to make ends meet. And folks are grappling with the impacts of climate change, the anxiety of water scarcity, and what our future holds. And folks I know, like, don't want to necessarily wait for someone else to solve it, but genuinely want to be part of the solutions. I hear that every single time when I'm knocking on doors in neighborhoods or out in rural areas. Folks want to see solutions and they want to be engaged in solution making. The county's got a significant budget, $1.7 billion. And it provides far-reaching critical services and infrastructure for not only the city of Tucson, Marana, and the town of Sahuarita, but all the way across the sprawling District 3 through the Tonato Nation and out to Ajo and the many wildlife refuges and national monuments. I can say that I have for my entire career sat on the other side of the table from policymakers, trying to push them to do things that they often don't want to do, but should do. That has given me the perspective of seeing some great policymakers, some horrible policymakers. I was very active in the times at the fight against SB 1070 up at the Arizona legislature. So I've seen kind of how bad folks can be. But there's also, and just to be frank, a lot of folks who are kind of just hanging out in the middle. And I think that does a huge disservice to the multiple layers of crises that our communities are facing. And it does a tremendous disservice to our communities who want to be engaged, who want to be connected to their leaders, who want to be part of leadership, and need problems solved and deserve to have problems solved. So my model of leadership and my model of engaging with communities is one that mirrors my track record of working in organizations and through organizing. As I'm talking with people right now, I'm asking them about what they know about the county and what are the things that they could and should be demanding from the county. And that if elected as their county supervisor, what they could be demanding of me and the other colleagues on the board of supervisors. I believe that government and the role of government is not just to provide kind of the services and the infrastructure, but it's also intended to level the playing field for our communities. I don't believe that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because what often happens is that not everybody has access to the wheel or they get thrown off the wheel. I think that the role of government is to ensure that there is a level playing field and that all people are afforded the opportunity to succeed, to have dignity, opportunity, and safety. There's a number of things that I am really excited about and some opportunities that are kind of cooking at the county level that I look forward to kind of digging into. So a couple of things, and you may have actually seen this in your inbox, but the county just started digging into a climate action plan. There was a survey that was sent out to all county residents and just kind of scraping the surface. I am very interested in really leaning in and helping ensure that the county's climate plan, given the scope and scale of the county, is deep and far-reaching. The past plan focused primarily around county operations. So think about sort of building energy efficiency or fleets. But thinking what it could be a plan that expands out 20 plus years and reaches out to ensure that not only how we get our energy, but how we generate our energy, and ensuring that our communities themselves are able to be resilient to the impacts of climate change, because the fact is, it's we all know it is here. And the more that we can do to be strong and to be resilient and ensure that our communities continue to thrive and be safe, I think we will be in a much better place, and we can continue to live in this beautiful but yet fragile desert. So working on a bold climate plan is a huge priority. And it's also the top thing that I keep hearing from people when I'm out knocking on doors. The second piece is there was just an initiative passed, I think it was just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, at the county level called the Prosperity Initiative. It is It is a bold effort. And at this point, it's sort of large, like kind of high level effort to combat generational poverty in Pima County. And it's complex, right? It brings together a lot of the really core services of the county and thinking about housing, thinking about early childhood care and education, workforce development, and then thinking about community development and all of these pieces of the county that really get at some of the fundamental needs that our communities and our neighborhoods have. So the Prosperity Initiative, and I should also say it's an effort that works not just at the county level, but thinking in coordination and working in coordination with the city of Tucson and Marana and working with the tribal nations to ensure that we are creating the safety net, the security and the opportunities for all county residents, and that when we are not just providing, and not that it's a just, but we're not limiting ourselves to thinking about just immediate services, but we're thinking longer term to combat the systemic ways in which poverty gets reproduced in our families' lives, in our communities' lives. Criminal justice is also a third priority. As many of you have heard, seen, been involved in, there's a lot of debate around our current jail. The Pima County Jail has one of the highest death rates, sort of per capita death rates of jails across the country. It's complicated why that happens. But the solution that has been on the table is that it's an infrastructure problem. We need a new jail. People aren't dying because of the building. People are dying for a number of reasons. One is that we need greater accountability within the jail itself and need to ensure that the culture that is operating is a culture that indeed respects and treats with dignity and care the folks that are in jails. Because mind you, folks have not yet been tried. They have not been found guilty. They're only being held. And not that folks should die that have been tried, but thinking that it's a holding facility. And then folks are in jail where jail is not the solution, right? Incarceration doesn't solve addiction. Incarceration doesn't put a roof over your head. Incarceration doesn't solve mental health. And so ensuring that we have services that are meaningful, that are substantive, that can help treat the conditions, the circumstances that are putting people in confrontation with law enforcement is the solution. Not rounding folks up and throwing them in jail where their lives are endangered as they are suffering through the consequences of addiction or are struggling with mental health issues. There's a lot of push and energy around the county, and this is that, not be a lone voice in this effort to ensure that the services are there. There's growing momentum and bodies of research that reinforce that we need to separate out these issues, and that incarceration is not a one-size-fits-all treatment to the very important and complex issues facing folks who are often in jails. And then lastly, housing. 1 in 10 folks in Pima County live in manufactured homes. Our county is not and particularly in District 3, the median household income is under $50,000. So we need, and I should say, as I'm out talking with folks in Amado and Arivaca and Ajo, housing is a critical issue. And it looks different in different communities of what people need. But the county has a really important role to play in ensuring that we have housing that is safe, that's dignified. I saw a number of places out in Amado the other day where the roof was coming in, the doors were just hanging off in a small little trailer court. We have the power of the role, again, kind of thinking about role of government, has the power to push property managers and owners to do right by their folks and to comply with the law around providing safe and dignified housing. So the county has an important role. Our community needs a solid, safe roof over their head. And I think that that would be a piece that I would be very excited and interested in continuing to further across Pima County and particularly out in District 3. So that's me. It's a little bit about why I'm running, some of the things that are important to me. I, am obviously looking for, right now, still fairly early in the campaign. I have been collecting petition signatures, raising money, and galvanizing volunteers. We're doing weekend phone banks and canvases and going out to events and collecting signatures, talking with people, gathering input about what the issues are, what people think are important, keeping that front and center as we drive the campaign forward. Yeah, so I would love any questions.
Yes, Kat Stratford has a question. So unmute yourself, Kat.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, Jen. So I'm a huge fan of just everything that you just said. I wish I could have been half as eloquent as you are when I was speaking. Just amazing job. So I know that you touched on housing a little bit, and I actually happen to have some housing numbers in front of me because that's what I do for a living. So as of this year, we've already experienced almost 900 evictions here within Pima County. That's just the number of evictions filed with Pima County Justice Court. These are numbers that I got from Emergency Eviction Legal Services with Pima County. So obviously this creates a tremendous amount of stress for families. It's really hard to become housed once you are unhoused. And with such a high number of evictions already this year, last year we were up almost over 1,000 evictions from the year prior. So evictions are on the rise still to this day. And I was wondering if you had any ideas for solutions to keep people in their homes, because if we can prevent evictions, that's less work for me. Thank you.
Great questions, and thanks for the stat. That's startling. There's a number of things, right? Like I tend to think about like if you think about like sort of the concentric circles and working our way out, and at the very core is stopping the eviction and what can be done in the very, very short term. And so, the county has a program that provides legal assistance, right? And if there's some grounds and providing some support to try to fight the eviction. Unfortunately, though, and this sort of pops us out to those next levels, there's not enough protections in the state that serve to prevent people from being evicted. I know that Betty Villegas has in the hopper some legislation that she is going to introduce. I don't know that it will pass this round, but I have a lot of confidence that maybe in the next cycle. But it looks at rent control. Sorry, I'm trying to think about that. If y'all remember that presidential candidate a couple cycles ago who just kind of ran on the campaign slogan, and pardon my French, but like the rents are too damn high. They are. He got a lot of votes, even though that was like pretty much the entire the shell of his campaign was just that slogan. But rents are outpacing the rents are outpacing the growth in people's salaries. People can't afford it. And so as a community, we can't have housing consuming more than 50% of people's income. There's just, the numbers will never add up, and people will always be in the red. And so, that's not like, I just think that like, that's not who we are as people, as a community. And so we need to come up with some solutions that can help balance those scales back out. I think that there's other ways, to do it too. I think that, Betty's concept is a solid one, and it needs to get out there. That may not be what we would ultimately get. But I actually think that there's a lot of value in putting out what the, kind of which hand is my left, the sort of the left extreme. And so that what we land on might be somewhere more in the middle. That would be more that we can get across and that we can win. So, so I'm happy that there is some momentum at the legislature to really come up with some deeper level solutions so that we're not fighting eviction case and case by case by case basis, because people need the safety and security to know they can keep their home.
Great.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. You're correct. Rent prices are actually up about 50 to 60% on average since 2020, according to the numbers I have. So thank you so much for your answer.
Very good. Mike Bryan has his hands up.
So we have Art Benson asking in the chat room. He thinks that Arizona no longer permits strip searches of pretrial detainees, and you can certainly correct him if he's wrong about that. If that is correct, and those people can introduce contraband into the jail, do you think that has anything to do with the jail death rate at all?
So I can't speak to the I don't know whether or not the strip searches of pretrial detainees is or is, I can't confirm it either way, but there is, but fundamentally the question, yeah, drugs are getting into the jail. And that's a tremendous problem. And I think it is thought that it is coming in from folks who are coming in, and it's coming in from staff. And if we think about and so we have to think about, and I think, as I said before, kind of thinking about accountability and culture within the agency itself, within the department itself. We got to make sure that that's not happening from the staff side at all. And then if folks are bringing it in and smuggling it in, that's also not acceptable. So yeah, I think it contributes to it. It is not, it's not the only reason that people are dying from just overdoses. There's other things that are happening as well. And then it's the response, I guess I should say too. It's the response of officers when people are going through the overdose and are going up and down through the cycle of drugs. And if the response is not, sometimes it's lethal. So there's that too.
So a follow-up on that is, do we have a detailed understanding of the causes of death in our jails? I mean, what percentage is, drug overdose? What percentage is medical neglect, violence? What is the breakdown of the pathologies that are causing us to have such an unusually high death rate, if you're aware?
So, the medical examiner kind of stepped up, the county medical examiner recently, I think it was towards the end of last year, and did a re-examination of the death rates, and actually sort of found that that the death rate in the jails was too low, because there were people who were dying that were being transported to the hospital, and they would die in the hospital, but they just left the jail. So it wasn't being counted as a jail death. So the numbers have then been adjusted, and I think the medical examiner has been going back and digging more deeply into those numbers. I don't know what they are off the top of my head. The county also has, since I'm running, I've been, and I'm not an incumbent, so I am learning about a lot of the issues and making sure that I understand them from the county perspective, from the operational side of things. So I'm making my way around, meeting with the different department directors, meeting with the county administrator, so that I can get a deeper understanding. The county has a Justice Services, if I've got the name right, I just met with their director. That is, it's basically the data department. And they do, I was super impressed, for lack of better words, for the number crunching, and the commitment to doing really good quality research and collecting the data that's necessary to help inform the decisions made by county leadership and the Board of Supervisors. So I'm thrilled that sort of research capacity and data capacity and commitment is there.
And I do have a follow-up on the previous question about housing, and that is on the supply side. How do we encourage there to be the creation and making available more housing at a reasonable price point here in Pima County to address the issue?
Yeah, I mean, some things, again, I won't pretend that I have, solid expertise. I am still learning. Um, and I have seen some successful efforts, a lot of stuff within the city of trying to push developers to ensure that as they're building new housing stock, that a significant proportion of that is lower income housing stock, and efforts to try to keep the rents at a manageable level. So I think that there's a lot of leverage between kind of government and the developers for how these things happen.
Yeah.
And you fully utilizing the leverage that the county has around development to ensure that the needs, that it's not just being developed for a profit, but that we are doing development that actually supports the needs and the realities of our community and the sustainability of our communities.
Yeah, let me just point out here that just as with rent control, the state has interfered with local control over these matters at the state level, but also with housing supply, especially low income housing supply. The state has also interfered with local control in that they restrict the ability of the counties to be able to require a certain percentage of new development to be lower income or accessible housing.
Okay, Nelson Tam has a question. Unmute yourself, Nelson.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Nelson Tam. I'm calling in from California, actually. I'm on two county supervisor races here in Alameda County, which is a 2 million populated county, a little bit east of San Francisco. Now, got a real big problem with one issue is that a third of California is over 65 this decade, right? And I think that translates nationwide. And I have a parent who's 85 and who's succumbed to a couple of minor strokes. And now we have no choice, right? We can either spend $15,000 a month for in-home care or we do Medicaid facilities, right? Now, I think that one of these main problems affecting folks nationwide is that a lot of people do want to age in place, right? They need in-home supportive care. And how that works out in our county is that if you succumb to a catastrophic situation where all of a sudden you're disabled, but you want to stay in home, you're not even going to get a social worker to make that benefits determination for 11 weeks. And when you do, to find a caregiver willing to work for 21 an hour, you're waiting months and months and months. Where do you see the resource allocation for this need in your county? And what do you think are the forward resource allocations and programs that need to be implemented to help people age in place?
Mm. Man, that's a great question. I'll say I also have parents that are in their 80s. And I joke about the fact that we've got an empty spot in the backyard that we can we'll pitch a tent for you there. But just to take your posing of the problem and then make it even more difficult. I've been talking with folks out in Ajo, for example. There's no resources for folks out in sort of rural areas in particular. So even after going through the if it's 11 weeks here, but the process by which you get your benefits, you've got to move into Tucson or up in Phoenix and lose your entire kind of social safety net and your friendships, which are incredibly important at all levels of our lives. I have to say, I'm not entirely sure what we can do to allocate the resources necessary to ensure that folks can stay at home and have the quality care that they need, and to ensure that if they make the decision not to stay at home, that the care that they receive is dignified quality care. Because we put my grandma in a home. She had pretty extreme dementia. And we pulled her out of a few places because there was mold growing in the corners, and like she was just not treated right. So I mean, it is a challenge, and particularly out in District 3 is it's an older district. So I think between looking at there's some tremendous nonprofits, right? Pima Council on Aging. We have our health department, which does a lot of work out into the community. I think we need to just dig in, and I say we need to, and it's very well that the county might be doing this as we speak, but it's just something. Anyway, thanks for flagging it, and I'll dig into it more because I'm interested.
Okay. Mike, I think we either have a chat or you have a question.
Yeah, actually, it's me with a question this time. During the upcoming term for District 3, were you to become our supervisor, one of the major issues that's going to come up is the reauthorization or not reauthorization of the RTA. And obviously, some of us have a certain perspective because we live in Tucson. Some of us have a different perspective because we live outside of Tucson about the RTA. So I'd like to hear how you're approaching it, how you think your constituents are going to be affected by it, and sort of, just the framework of your thought around the issue of reauthorization of the RTA.
Yeah. I will, again, that doesn't sound like a broken record of sorts, so I'm just digging in. One of the co-chairs of my campaign is Carolyn Campbell. She's been the co-chair for the Citizens Advisory Group of RTA. We're actually slated to spend some time to just dig into it, so that I can better understand how the role of the Citizens Advisory Group, and some of the struggles and tensions. I hear them as I'm out talking with folks. Again, in Ajo, RTA provides support for a bus company, a van company. And that is like that's it. That's what they got. There's 5 runs a day that go to Phoenix, 1 run a day that comes to Tucson. And then they have an opportunity where people can call and get picked up, sort of like a sort of Uber-esque. And that's supported by RTA. Rural communities in Pima County, they don't, transportation is critical. And especially as services, sort of again thinking about, like, as it relates back, as services get cut by the legislature, then the need then for transportation, the concentration then of services, people need to get into Tucson. They have to get up into Phoenix to make their appointments. And so we've got to make sure that the solution is bringing in rural communities, as well as thinking about where the concentration of our population centers are. A District 3, 65% of the voters live in incorporated areas, City of Tucson, Marana, and the town of Sahuarita. So, ensuring that we've got some good quality transportation that can help move people, get us out of our cars, at the same time without sacrificing the desert land, the desert that we all value and that brings us here and keeps us here, and ensuring that we're sort of balancing all of these factors would be the things that, like, a really high level would be how I'd think about it. But the details, I still got to roll my sleeves up and get into it.
Okay. Anything else, Mike?
No questions in the
Okay.
chat currently, and I don't see any hands up, so I'll go ahead and throw in another question here. This should be a little bit easier one. Endorsements. Do you have any endorsements yet? Are you hoping for any endorsements? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so really early on, kind of back in October, when I was thinking about running, I reached out to Congressman Grijalva, who I've known because I've worked with him a lot around immigration and border issues, and asked him what he thought. Told him I was really interested in it, and if I did do it, would he support me? And the answer was yes. So I am happy to have the support of Congressman Grijalva. I'm also, let's see, other folks, former Congressman Ron Barber, who I worked with at a neighborhood level. He used to be my neighbor. We worked together to improve our park in our neighborhood, but then I also worked with him when he was a member of Congress, again, around kind of border and immigration issues. State LD21 Senator Rosana Gabaldon, again, somebody who I worked with a lot around kind of border and immigration issues and ensuring that communities like Sahuarita are heard from. So she has endorsed me. I am also endorsed by City Council members Paul Cunningham, Lane Santa Cruz, Kevin Dahl, and then former City Council members Karen Ulick and Nina Tresoff. And then, I sought the nomination for the interim, or what's now I sought the nomination for the appointment for the position, and I have a lot of support around the appointment, and I'm in the process of shifting some of that appointment support into campaign endorsement support. If you dug into the nitty-gritty of it, I had a letter of support from Congressman Ruben Gallego, who I worked with a lot when I was at the League of Conservation Voters, and really trying to elevate up the fact that Latinos and Latino families and communities and leaders are environmental champions and have been, which helped kind of frame, which highlighted then, I think, Ruben's leadership and voting record on the environment. And several others really kind of leaned in and helped support me for the appointment. So yes, so more to come on the endorsements, and I'm also just now reaching out to organizations as well, many of whom that I've worked with over the years on different issues to back my campaign.
Okay, we have a question for you from Lillian Fox.
Okay. This is not really a question, but the young man or the gentleman earlier who talked about what a disaster it is getting care for elderly parents. Something to keep in mind when you work on that. A lot of elderly people have no relatives to advocate for them. I have a friend who has severe dementia. She didn't have any children. Her sister didn't have any children. She's the last one left. She has some distant cousins who live in California and some distant cousins who live in New Mexico. And she has a couple of neighbors like me who've known her for 30 years. But when you're not a relative, you don't have the power of attorney. It's very limited what you can do to help people. And so we need to think in terms about what about these elderly people who do not have family to advocate for them. And then the other people who have problems is a lot of families who'd like to advocate have no idea what resources might be available to them. And so a lot of education is needed for families. And then also, what are you going to do about old ladies and old men who have no family to advocate for them?
Yeah. It's profoundly important. I was thinking, and this is clearly not the case for a lot of folks, but there's so many examples of neighborhoods and neighbors who have stepped up to try to keep folks in their homes. Like I think about, so years ago, I worked for an organization called Pro Neighborhoods. It was a partnership with the City County United Way and the Community Foundation. And a kind of neighborhood leader, Judy Klinko, had started up kind of neighbors helping neighbors. I think it's called in-home services. And now it's an organization, but initially it was just neighbors identifying other people in their neighborhood who need some care at a lower level of care, to ensure that people could stay in their home and to try to prolong that period as long as possible so they could stay in the community. I know that doesn't get at kind of, I think, the heart of your really important point that some folks are, especially as they're grappling with increasing dementia, and there's no one there that really digs in. And right now it is a labyrinth to navigate. And so, yes, I think it's an important point that needs to be central to care for seniors and making it accessible.
Jim Hannon has a question.
Hi, Jennifer. Really glad you're running. It looks like this proposed new freeway alignment would go through your district. And just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't see a need for I-11. And the harm that it would do, you know, it's tackles and would go through some of the areas that are the reasons that, you know, some of the like tourist anchors from the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum, the Saguaro National Park, would all be negatively impacted by I-11. Incredible regions around the Ironwood National Forest. It's the route that has been proposed, I think, is absurd, especially given that right now, you know, I-10 is being torn apart as it is to already expand it. It's just hard for me to understand a justification for a legitimate justification that would justify the far-reaching negative impacts it would have on our communities for building a new highway. So I have been and will be opposed to it.
Okay, Mike Bryan.
So looks like we're getting a little bit low on time, but I'd like to follow up with my budgetary question. Have you had a chance to familiarize yourself with the $1.7 billion budget of the county and where it's going to? And more importantly, do you have an idea of whether we are requiring more or less revenue into the future? Generally more, but I mean, where might we get that from if we need more revenue? And where do we need to put more resources? And where can we make savings? Do you have an idea as to how our budgetary allocation needs to be shifted were you to become one of our supervisors?
Yeah, humor me for just one sec while I roll right over here and I will roll right back. This is the county budget. It's
I swear to God, these questions aren't planted. She's just really well prepared.
It's 670 pages. I have not gotten all the way through it. But I'm learning a lot, and I have a very long list of questions that that I intend to sit down and ask Jan Lesher about, who has said that she is available to answer any and all questions. So I think I would be I think I would be throwing darts in the dark if I attempted to like tackle your really substantive question in a meaningful way. That said, the county hasn't done a bond. It had a bond failure in is that 2014, 2016? The bond didn't pass. There's a lot of people have lots of different analysis on why it didn't pass. Some say that it was just the way that it was structured. It was designed as this like grab bag that didn't have a good message, didn't convey a clear vision for how that particular bond could really strengthen our community and move our community forward. Just again, having not made it all the way through and without, just saying, don't hold me to this. But like we need to generate some resources. The county is feeling some, economic, what is this, tightening. And so I think we need to think about some resource generation that does not continue to like exacerbate some of the economic strain of many of our lower and middle income families in our county.
Vince Pulaski, he said, as a follow-up to the I-19 controversy, I would like to know what ideas Ms. Allen might have on connecting Saguaro National Park across I-10 and the railroad to natural areas to the east, maybe via the Rito and Canada del Oro. This is especially important as plans are going to widen Silverbell.
I guess I'm wondering, is it connecting it via roads or connecting it for the purpose of kind of preserving the corridor for wildlife? Are we connecting people or the land?
And while we're waiting for Vince, I'm very interested in your work with the League of Conservation Voters. And you mentioned that you had an outreach program that grew from your position to a whole department. So I'm really curious to know what your secret to success was.
What's really funny is that when I left Border Action Network, right, which was based here in Arizona, and then I took the job with LCV, part of my interest was in moving to a national organization was I was so interested in trying to figure out how to build towards scale. Right, I was an executive director of Border Action for a decade, and you know, we kind of hit a wall on the growth of the organization, and I saw national groups come into communities, for better or worse, but it looked like they would just kind of sprinkle out some water and then poof, these sort of field programs would pop up. And I was like, how do they do that? What is the secret sauce to it? So I went to go work for LCV, and lo behold, the secret sauce, it's money. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. So the secret sauce to being able to go from Latino outreach to, and then I, moved up to being a national director, and then moved to being a department head as a senior vice president, was I raised money. I had great ideas of how to go from just an outreach program, which was kind of one-dimensional, of like, here, let us give you information. And then I built out an organizing program of Chispa that is much more building a bigger base. And so, we built a whole new constituency for the organization, which then kept growing and growing. So my role kept growing and growing as the constituency base grew. And then it furthered the understanding that, what all the polls were showing, not just LCV, but others, that communities of color, particularly Latino folks, care a ton about environmental issues. And then moreover, want to get involved, and their levels of concern and polling numbers are higher than white folks. And so all these national environmental groups that have big, kind of field programs and work had been missing the boat by not engaging communities of color. And so I was able to kind of tap into that in a really meaningful, significant way. And Chispa continues on today as being a really successful program that operates in 7 or 8 states across the country.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. It's always wonderful to hear you making your case and answering questions. And we'd love to have you back as the election gets closer.
Great.